Good morning to one and all present here. I'm Dr. L. Santosh Kumar, Assistant Professor of English at Christianity College, Autonomous, Bengaluru, Karnataka, India. Today, I'm here to give a talk on a topic, Indianness and Motherhood. It gives me immense pleasure to meet you all virtually. Let me begin with the topic. And when we talk about Indianness and Mother Earth, a day is not sufficient. And most importantly, we all know India is a land which is known for unity in diversity. And most importantly, the foreigners, they respect our nation due to its culture and the political monopolization or the aftermath of political monopolization has created a devastating impact on the life of Indians. But yet then India as a country or India as an embodiment is not being shattered in terms of culture. We celebrate different cultures, but yet then we don't give up on our own cultures. The concept called fragmentation might be prevalent in the contemporary times, even though it had its origin in America. America, which is said to be the birthplace of melting pot of culture, and in the words of postmodernism, the fragmentation as a discourse or as an element had its pivotal birth in America. And even though the impact of fragmentation can be found in the Indian soil, but yet then we as an Indians, we never compromised on our culture because we consider our culture to be a sacred thing. And most importantly, we consider that culture is not something what we perceive. Culture is a manifesto which is being embedded within each and every Indian by default. Of course, we celebrate or we encourage multiculturalism, but yet then we are not being compromised in our traditional practices or in our traditional roots. And let us look at the next slide. And if you look at here, this particular slide, it talks about the nuances or the trajectories of Indian writing in English. And when you look at Indian writing in English, right from the good old past, we are supposed to talk about the triumvirs of Indian writing in English, and most importantly, Indian writing in English as a discourse or as a literary phenomenon has got so many political ramifications. And the reason is that if you look at other branch of literatures, by default, they would have got their country name along with the word literature. Whereas when it comes to Indian literature, we have got only two names. That is Indian writing in English or Indian literatures translated into English. So these are the two names which are Indian writing in English or Indian literature in general has got. And why it is so? And the reason behind is that English was a colonial language for us. And when we look at Lord Macaulay's Merit on Education, where he firmly emphasized on the fact that he need a class of Indians. I just repeat, he need a class of Indians who are English in blood, taste, and color. And he also said that by learning English language, one can have financial upliftment, whereas learning English language through Shakespeare, one will be having a moral refinement. And he also said that every king in Great England or Great UK, they wanted to become an empire, and for that, they have started to expand their own territories. And unknowingly, unconsciously, English was used as a colonial language. And till now, English language is highly politicized in various aspects. And when we look at the role of English in the Indian soil, or the role of English in Indian writing in English, it has created a paradigm shift. And most important thing here is that India is said to be a land of diverse factors. And when all these factors are brought into a focal, or when all these factors are brought into a particular center, what happened is that the unification or the emergence of different cultures gain momentum to a greater extent. And most important thing is that almost all the Indian writers, starting from the good old past until now, they have never failed to record the importance of culture in their literary works. To put it in other words, Indian writing in English, it often foregrounds or showcases the cultural sensibilities of an author. And through that particular author, the particular culture is being made known to the world. The voices of the individual are made known to the world through collective experiences. And another most important aspect of Indian writing in English is that it, it talks about the connection between past, present, and future. And to a greater extent, Indian writing in English and the writers who are said to be the representatives of Indian writing in English, they stressed on the fact that when they write about their home, or when they write about their homeland, by default, they are supposed to talk about their culture. And they also speak about the ramifications in the culture, but yet then, even though there are so many ramifications, but yet then the essence or the sanctity of culture is never being lost. And most importantly, these writers, they stress on the fact that how how pathetic the past was, and how terrible the present is, and how horrible the future would be in terms of cultural amalgamation. Yet then, there are few writers who are said to be the cultural torchbearers of Indian writing in English, who firmly believe that even though there might be an amalgamation, or even though there might be fragmentation, but yet then India as a country, Indian writing in English as a literary discourse will always emphasize on the cultural sanctity of Indianness. And most important thing here is that Indianness and Indian writing in English cannot be separated. When we talk about Indian writing in English, we are supposed to we are supposed to talk about the cultural codes. And most importantly, these cultural codes act as an impetus to the upcoming generations. And the beauty of Indian writing in English is that it always denote the fact that India or India or Indian or Indianness, they are not irreconcilable binaries. They are reconcilable binaries from a different specters. And most important thing here is that India as a country, it is said to be the cradles of almost all the cultures, and a country's a country's landmark, or a country's identity is being judged based on two parameters. First one is based on the riverbeds, and as we all know, riverbeds are said to be the cradles or the birthplace of a civilization. And second most important thing is that a country's identity is being identified or is being made known to the world based on a particular culture. And as we said in the beginning, India is said to be a land of unifying culture. And all these unifying cultures have got so many untold or unheard histories and facts. But yet then all these facts and all these histories are being visible to the people in the form of oral traditions, and which is the biggest asset in the Indian writing in English. And if you look at this particular slide, it talks about the importance of motherhoods. And why do we talk about the importance of motherhood in Indian writing in English? Because the poem which is taken for discussion here is Nizam Ezekiel's The Night of the Scorpion. And when you look at that particular poem, if you look at the life of the poet Nizam Ezekiel, who is known for his famous poetical line, and the biographers or the critics of Nizam Ezekiel claim that this particular line is said to be an autobiographical line of Nizam Ezekiel. A poet rascal clown was born, a muggling wolf among the Jews. Okay, a poet rascal clown was born, and a muggling Jew among the wolves. This is one of the famous poetic line of Nizam Ezekiel in his famous poem Background Casually. And in this particular, if you look at Nizam Ezekiel in general, is if you look at his ancestral roots, he is a kind of a person who is from the Jewish community. And we all know the plight of Jews in the contemporary times, and also from right from the good old past. And because of the sin which they have done, yet then their survival or their identity is put forth to a greater extent. And when we talk about homelessness, the first victims or the first group of people who are said to be the prey for homelessness is Jewish community. And in the words of Jewish community, it would be apt here to quote the words of Martin Heidegger, who said that homelessness is coming to be the destiny of the world. And Nizam Ezekiel, in throughout his poems, with reference to the Night of the Scorpion, he talks about the rustic life of Indianness. And most importantly, he tries to indicate the fact that how culture, religion, and superstitious beliefs they amalgamate each other, but yet then, even though they amalgamate, but yet then it is only the motherhood which is keeping the Indian culture and tradition alive to a great extent. And to put it in the words of Nizam Ezekiel, he always emphasizes on the fact that it is only the Indian culture is being celebrated. It's because of the Indian motherhoods. And people here would ask me a question. Motherhood is said to be a holy thing, and most importantly, it is being celebrated throughout the world. Yes, and then it is being celebrated throughout the world, but to be honest, and we can feel proud in saying that in a country like India, the women folks are said to be the custodians of culture. And most importantly, it is only these women folks, they preserve and they portray the Indianness to a greater extent. And most important thing here is that we as a people or we as a human beings, when we talk about the culture, by default, it's only the women folks are at the center. When we look at the traditional practices or when we look at the traditional roots, it is only women are being foregrounded and culture has become the backdrop. And when you look at this particular poem, The Night of the Scorpion, where the scorpion would have stung the mother, and what happened was that the people and the children, including the father, everyone was confused for a while. And some people they started to predict the fact that the mother who had become the prey for scorpion's tongue, she would have done something sin in the past. And because of that, she's being tested now. And some say that all her sins would be washed away by that scorpion sting. And each and every one of them was giving a multiple perspective. But yet then the mother, she was being very patient. And most importantly, the father of the family is the kind of a person who never believed in all these practices or who never believed in all these superstitious beliefs. But yet then he was being very silent because he just want his wife to be completely cured from the pain which she is undergoing. And as the time passes away, as the time passes away, uh, the mother who had been tolerating the pain, the physical pain, and the mental pain which is being created to her by the people who are around. And also at the same time, we don't have any right to blame those people because they are the people who are talking out of their own experiences. And it is a well-known fact in a country like India, if when we look at the rustic life, when anything harm had happened to us, any individual, by default, the age-old people or the people who sprung from the villages, they will have a certain belief and certain cultural codes, and they try to associate that. And by connecting these people, it would be apt for us to quote the words of Barry Commoner, who said that everything is connected to everything else. The moment when he said everything's connected to everything else, people here would question me, how can you bring in the element of ecology or eco-consciousness in the Nizam, the mother of the scorpion? To be honest, when we talk about culture or when we talk about women, by default, the element ecology comes into practice. And most importantly, ecology is said to be a proactive discourse. And what happens here is that the scorpion stung, okay, the mother would be losing her patience, but yet then she never expressed any of her opinions, she never expressed any of her opinions out. But yet then at last what happens when she was completely released from the pain, she would be uttering the sin by saying that thank God the scorpion had stung on me instead of my children. And there, the poet, he ends the poem. And there lies the beauty of motherhood. When you look at this particular side, it says that the beauty of motherhood is not a certain capability, but willingness to include. So it would be apt to say that Indianness or Indian writing in English would not have gained momentum without the culture and motherhood to a greater extent, and that is applicable or that is visible through the great poets and to the great poets, and one among them is Nizam Ezekiel. And I just want to conclude my presentation by saying that it is only women folks who are said to be the custodians of culture, and most importantly, these people, these women folks in general, they undergo the difference between roots ROOTS versus ROUTES. Even though they travel, even though they travel uh, physically and mentally to different cultures, but yet then they hold on to their nativism. It is only the nativism and native identity is creating a unique impact in Indian writing in English. And let us all feel proud in saying that we as a Indians should celebrate our culture. We as a people should accept other cultures, but when it comes to practicing, we are not supposed to give up on our own ancestral roots. The moment when you give up our ancestral roots, it is like giving up our own life. And each and every culture or each and every practices in India has got an unifying impact, and we are supposed to follow it, even though we might be dispersed, even though we might be migrated to different parts of the world, but yet then it is only the cultural sanctity makes us to be disciplined, makes us to be more open-minded, and makes us to feel that we are being connected to our land. That is none other than India. Thank you so much for listening to me.